Is fall starting while La Nina fades? I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, September 1st.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time. No hype.
If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You'll get automatic notifications when the videos are posted, typically on Sunday evenings. If you have a question or comment, please write it up down below. We'd be happy to respond. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Matt Graves, Ken and Tell. These are some new contributors. I appreciate your donation. And then our longtime contributors, Coach Nate, Tim Caston, Evolution Moto. Thank you so much. And Vincent M., very generous contribution. Thank you. And then there was an anonymous donor. I'm not mentioning names. It was a super generous donation in memoriam of somebody that visits Stormsurf. And, you know, I'm actually pretty floored. And that sort of gets me, I'm going to talk just for a second here, to thinking about some other people that have passed recently. Larry Haynes is one I know, and I'm thinking about very unexpectedly, out of the blue. Matt Raff, another Stormsurf viewer, just out of the blue, they passed away, you know, unexpected. It's kind of makes you think, and I don't really know the situation of the anonymous donor, but my guess is it might have been a similar sort of situation. It makes me think that every day that I get to paddle out in the water, I should really appreciate more that opportunity to be conscious, to be able to be aware of what's going on, to feel the water on your face, to feel the air, to ride a wave, the exhilaration of all that, or skiing or backpacking outdoors, whatever it is you do. It's really a super special thing. When you think about that, the SETI project has been going on for decades now, and they haven't found any signs of conscious life that we're aware of so far in our immediate corner of the Milky Way galaxy. It kind of makes you think that maybe what's going on here on Earth is a very special thing, and that to have conscious life and being able to appreciate this universe, this planet, the solar system that we live in, and then to be able to drive it down to, oh, I surf, I ski, I snowboard, I backpack, whatever it is you do, it's a really special thing. So that's enough for my secular sermon for the evening, but take a moment, breathe in, enjoy your life on this planet. And with that, let's get to work. So first off, we'll do a quick look at significant wave heights for not the North Pacific, not the South Pacific, but the entire planet. Yes, we're looking at our new wave models, or our large screen, large format wave models. We talked about that last week where you can see it, but it's in the wave model section of Stormsurf. We see in the North Pacific, nothing really going on. Remnants of some tropical systems, but not even producing 15-foot seas. Southern Hemisphere, 20-foot seas over a small area, but of no real interest. We go over to the South Atlantic, a much quieter pattern. Yes, seas in the 15-foot range or so. North Atlantic, not a whole lot going on. Indian Ocean, though, things semi-interesting. 36.9-foot seas here in the deep Indian Ocean, and then another area of 28 to 30-foot seas impacting eastern Australia, or we'll call it South Australia. So that is the best probability for surf. And then seas also pushing into the Tasman Sea, offering hope up into Fiji. But before we get into the forecast and all that, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to start in Northern California. The Point Reyes buoy number 029 off of just north of San Francisco. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy all the way up from 33.3 second period, real long period energy, which there is 0.0 feet of it, all the way down to 5 second period, just pure wind swell. We see in the 13 second range a little bit of, half a foot or so of energy, and then maybe a foot of energy in about the 10 second period range. We try to tease out the primary swells from this raw data. Primary swell, 2 feet at 9.1 seconds from 308 degrees. That theoretically would make surf at about 1.8 feet, maybe 2 feet. And yeah, there was some maybe waist-high waves at select locations this morning in Northern California. Then the secondary swell, 1.4 feet at 12.1 seconds from 249 degrees. Again, like knee-high sort of thing. Then we go to Southern California, the Point Loma South buoy 191, located off of San Diego. Again, the same sort of profile. Yeah, you see a tiny little 0.2 of a foot at 18 seconds, another little bit of energy in the 13 second period range, and then some wind swell all mixed in, none of it really of interest. So the primary swell, 2.2 feet at 6.2 seconds from the west, 281 degrees, making surf at 1.4 feet, or I'll call it knee high. Then the secondary swell, 1 feet at 12.7 seconds from 202 degrees, again, maybe 1.5 foot surf. Then we go to the south shore of the Hawaiian Islands. We're using the Lanai buoy number 239. Again, a rather quiet pattern there. Bits and pieces of energy peaking up to 0.8 of a foot in any one period band. Primary swell, 1.5 feet at 9.7 seconds from 172 degrees. That's 1.5 foot surf with some secondary energy thrown in there in about the 13 second range, and even smaller still. So let's do a quick recap. We're going to look for any signs of swell production. We're going to start in the South Atlantic. We're going back a week to Sunday, the 25th of August. There's a little area of seas here at, about 26 feet, but of no real interest, all aimed off to the east. So we got into Monday, the 27th, still really nothing happening. And there was this gale that was trying to form on Tuesday, Wednesday. It got 23-foot seas pushing off to the northeast. We were hoping for more out of it than what developed. And that kind of thing kind of faded off. Secondary energy developed with 33, you can see it here, 33.4-foot seas. These are the highest seas over this entire domain. You see a little plus sign there, and maybe there's the plus sign there. So that tells you where the highest seas actually are, and there's the coordinates. Winds at 50 knots. Theoretically, but that was falling southeast. Good for producing swell for Peru and Chile, but nothing relative to California or even Mexico. Then we're into Saturday. We're up to a day ago, and really nothing going on. The South Pacific getting very quiet. Conversely, a week ago in the North Pacific, the MJO was active, feeding tropical development, a series of 1, 2, 3 systems developed, plus one south of Japan. This was, again, a week ago, but we put that into motion. Here we are, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now, a little gale tried to organize Thursday south of the eastern Aleutians with seas, at 18.9 feet. We barely got to 20 feet. This was Thursday evening, the 29th of August. Some degree of tiny swell is expected into California, and really nothing for Hawaii because all the energy was aimed off to the east here. And then that system faded out. We're into Saturday and now Sunday, and very quiet indeed. No tropical activity occurring either. Going to the South Atlantic, we are a week ago, the 25th of August. I'll run this through. A little bit of area of seas at 24 feet south of Africa, a broader area of 26 to 27 foot seas, pushing 30 feet, very close to the coast here on Tuesday and Wednesday, the 28th of August, and then that pushed off. Swell was generated by that. And then here we are Saturday, and Sunday, things looking to be settling down. And then the Indian Ocean. Here we are again with Sunday a week ago. The focus south of Australia with, 36-foot seas. building to 37, but falling southeast, really just targeting Australia, maybe energy up into the Tasman Sea, but nothing out here in the greater area targeting Indonesia. Until we got into Thursday, a pretty solid system developed with 38.5 foot seas. This was late Thursday into Friday. And again, that has generated swell, but again, the target looks more like South Australia. And where are we? Here we are, current image. Another system with 36.9 foot seas, certainly generating some swell relative to Indonesia, though the main target seems to be Southern Australia. All right, so what is coming? We're going to start with the North Pacific Ocean, since the South Pacific seems pretty quiet. We're looking at Jetstream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a push in the jet to the south. Sort of like what you see here. That helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds get traction on the ocean surface, imparting energy to the ocean, generating seas. As those seas radiate away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements get groomed out, or they decay, basically, exposing longer period swell. And of course, swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So there is sort of a trough in the I'll call it the northern Gulf, but winds are not blowing very strong into it. We do have, 130 knot winds pushing over the Kuril Islands, but in general, the flow of the jet is over the Aleutian Islands, dipping a little bit here in the Gulf of Alaska, and then pushing up into Canada. We'll put this into motion, and the good news is that come Monday night into Tuesday, a legitimate trough is forecast starting to build here in the, I'll call it the northwestern Gulf of Alaska, being fed by nearly 140 knot winds pushing down into it. This is supportive of gale development. And then that system sort of pinches off as we get into Wednesday, the 4th of September, probably fades. But right behind that, another trough is forecast for Thursday and Friday. Not very strong, not a whole lot going on. Again, you see this pattern with everything just pretty much pushing over the Aleutians and then falling south in the Gulf. But anyways, we get into Saturday, the 7th of September, potential for another system, and let's go the whole way out to Sunday, and the pattern looks to be continuing beyond that. So a hint of fall in the forecast with maybe potential for I wouldn't call it a legitimate gale, but maybe the start of something, a good tease of a gale. So let's go down to the surface level pressure and surface level winds. Here is California, the Pacific Northwest, Alaska up here, Aleutian Islands, Kuril Islands, Japan, Philippines down here. Surface level pressure and surface level winds, high pressure at 1024 millibars controlling the Gulf. Not as strong as we had earlier this year when it was like bulletproof at 1036 millibars or something like that. And even a little bit of low pressure, 1012 millibars. That's not much, or 1012 millibars, not much of a low pressure system, but we put this into motion. As we get into Monday, here is the beginning. We know there's a trough trying to dig out here, a little gale, or actually low pressure system with 30 knot winds builds. And then by Monday night, it's a gale with 35 to almost 40 knot winds pushing down its western flank, targeting Hawaii, and then 30 to 35 knot winds targeting the U.S. West Coast. As we get into Tuesday, look at this, 45 knot winds with a broad area of 40 knot west winds targeting the whole U.S. West Coast and Hawaii, and then continuing, sort of hanging there through the day. Then Wednesday, it fades out. That actually looks semi-legit, especially considering the time of year. Anyway, now low pressure continues in the Gulf, but winds 25 knots, really need to see 35 knot winds to get anything meaningful. We'll roll this out, see if anything else happens. Notice some tropical systems forecast meandering here off Japan. I don't believe a model, especially a GFS model, especially in regards to tropical systems this far out, but something to keep your eye on. And especially sort of looking at the high pressure pattern here, it looks like there is potential for a recurvature if this happens, but again, it's a week out and that's a very long shot. So then let's look at the effect of those winds on the ocean surface. Here we are Sunday. Of course, not a whole lot going on, but then the beginnings of that Gulf low starts forming later Monday with seas 17.7 feet, building to 20 feet, building to 23 feet, building to about 23 feet, and then 28 feet. The model this morning actually had seas higher in this system, and especially aimed more at Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. This looks to be aimed more up at Canada or so, but still, potential for swell exists until about Wednesday when this system fades out. Then we roll it out. You see the tropical systems, again, 114 hours out, don't believe it. And we're just looking for anything 20-foot seas or better. We don't see it yet. So one system charted and within the 72-hour window, so there is some hope there. We go down south to the South Pacific. We're not getting into the Jetstream and all that stuff because for the reality, you see systems pushing from the Tasman Sea southeast, but nothing aimed off to the northeast. There is this pattern over here targeting Chile and Peru with 24, maybe 25 foot, and there's 31-foot seas. But again, way off in the southeast Pacific, of no interest to California. And then another system, as we get into this, again, this pattern, southeast falling storms, no fetch aimed off to the northeast, not doing anything relative to California or Hawaii until we get into Saturday. And this little system with 34-foot seas, 34.7 feet, is forecast pushing east of New Zealand, trying to organize, not really lifting north, but certainly not falling south. So maybe there's some hope there, and then that's the end of that. We'll do a real quick look here at the South Atlantic. Here's we are today. We're passing by that. Really nothing going on. We're into Thursday already, and then Friday and Saturday. 23-foot seas lifting northeast. I mean, that's good for 13, maybe 14-second period swell. Very close to the South African coast, though. Unsure how that will do and how raw whatever swell that it generates will be. And then seas, of course, building to 28 feet here a week out. And then the Indian Ocean. Well, we do have a gale here with 36.9-foot seas pushing off to the east. That's going to generate swell. You could probably see the swell front right here targeting Indonesia, Western Australia, and Southern Australia. That system fades out as we get into Tuesday. And then some more builds behind that with, 25-foot seas. But it too fades as we get into Saturday and Sunday. And a quieter pattern. This sort of leads one to believe the transition in the southern hemisphere from winter down there is happening and it's turning to springtime, while just the hints of things we're seeing in the North Pacific suggests that perhaps fall is starting to build in earnest in the Pacific. So let's drill into the surf forecast for a couple locations. We'll start Northern California, Half Moon Bay, San Francisco area, Ocean Beach, if you will. Really not a whole lot going on. Surf, if anything, dropping out as we get into Monday, and then in the 2.5-foot range Tuesday into Wednesday. But then as we get into Friday and Saturday, swell from the Gulf of Alaska, if that gale forms, arrives with surf heights in about the 3.5-foot range, and then slowly trickling down from there. Also notice that wind speeds pretty light during the entire time. Finally, we've broken the springtime pattern that has been plaguing us literally all summer. Swell heights, 3 feet at 7 seconds on Tuesday, Wednesdays. That's just wind swell. But when you get out here into Friday, 3.3 feet at 11 to 12 seconds sort of thing. Nothing major, but at least semi-legitimate swell, assuming all goes as forecast. Then we go to Southern California, pretty quiet pattern indeed, 1.5, maybe 2-foot surf if you're lucky, and 2.5 feet later in the work week fading down. Let's see what that's all about. Swell heights 1 feet at 13 seconds. This is just background southern hemiswell. A little bit bigger, 1.5 foot at 14 seconds as we get into Wednesday sort of thing, and holding into Thursday. And more of the same Friday and more of the same Saturday. All of it from the south. You can see the arrows here. But basically background southern hemiswell. The north shore of Oahu. Not a whole lot going on, but perhaps come Thursday, Friday again, swell from that same system in the northwestern Gulf of Alaska with surf heights in the 3.9 foot range, something like that, Thursday into Friday, then trickling down into Saturday. We can look at swell heights here, 3.3 feet at 11 to 12 seconds, and not a whole lot, just something to ride. Then we go to the South Atlantic, Jeffreys Bay. Not a whole lot happening. Here are local wind speeds, 30 knots, 20 knots, blowing pretty hard. But we do see surf heights, no real surf until we get into Sunday, Monday, 20 foot, 25 foot surf theoretically. Let's look at swell heights. Well, not a whole lot, 3-4 feet at 12 seconds kind of thing. And then up to 19 to 20 feet in the 11 to 13 second period range. Very raw swell. That's from local gale basically impacting the coast. So pretty much stormy conditions. And then finally, the standout spot of everywhere on the planet, Bali. Surf heights, 10 feet, fading, then back to 10 feet on Wednesday, Thursday, then back up to 10 feet again Friday, and then another pulse on Saturday, the 7th of September. And swell heights, 7 feet at 14 seconds, 6.5 feet at 15 seconds, 6.5 feet at 16 seconds, 7.5 feet, you get the idea. Lots of swell. Late season, time for a trip, maybe, looks pretty good. And then the temperature forecast for where the Pacific Crest Trail, this is in the Sierra, crosses Tioga Pass Road in Yosemite Valley. The elevation there about 8,700 feet. So this is the freeze level. You can see the red, that's freezing temperatures. That's at about 12,700 feet, a couple of spots here over the coming 10 days. But down at trail level, temperatures basically 50 to 55 degrees, trying to get to maybe 60 degrees for a couple days in there on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But really not a whole lot of change. Good time for a late season backpacking trip before things actually start getting cold. All right, let's go take a look long term. We're looking at the two major weather oscillations that affect surf and storm production across the planet. That is the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We're going to start by talking about the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases, the active phase and the inactive phase. The active phase is our friend. It is a low-pressure system, or effectively like a low-pressure system. The inactive phase, like a high-pressure system. The active phase being a low... and the inactive and the active phase travel around the planet from west to east on the equator. Active phase on one side of the planet, inactive phase on the other. The active phase being a low-pressure system, when it moves into the Pacific, it takes warm, moist air down at the ocean surface, lifts it aloft because it's a low pressure system. It sort of acts like a chimney. That warm, moist air hits the jet stream. It energizes the jet stream, a stronger jet, then feeds troughs and storm production and therefore swell production. The inactive phase does the exact opposite. Because it is like a high pressure system, it cuts off the flow of moist air up into the jet stream. The jet stream gets weak and splits and doesn't support storm production. All right, so we're looking at data from the TAO buoy array. That's a series of buoys strung across the equator. This is the equator here. This is the East Pacific here. This is the West Pacific here. You see the arrows. These are from wind sensors on the buoys. We only have temperature data over in here, but the wind sensors still appear to be working. There was a major upgrade 2 weeks ago in the West Pacific. You notice how many more arrows there are in this area out here. All this that was colored was giving us sea surface temperatures, last week, I believe it was. A lot of it's gone now. Maybe the team is out there. I'm hopeful. Doing maintenance on the buoys. There's a major project, of course, to upgrade all the buoys, get them all back in working order, and get this matrix filled out. So I'm hoping that's what's going on. Anyway, we can look at what errors there are, give us a sense of whether the active or inactive phase is in play. The longer the arrows, the stronger the wind. So trade's pretty strong out of the east. It sort of smells like the inactive phase, and pretty strong over the Central Pacific, pretty strong over the West Pacific. All this looks like the inactive phase over the Pacific. But it is not the actual wind speeds, it's the anomalies, different from normal for this time of year. And again, we still see that easterly pattern, like winds being stronger out of the east, over the East Pacific, Central Pacific, and over the West Pacific. So all that, again, smells like the inactive phase of the MJO. So what is the forecast? We're looking at zonal wind anomalies at 850 millibars. That's up about 4,700 feet, but a good proxy for what's going on at the surface. These are the winds stronger out of the east or west than normal? The blues, easterly anomalies, roughly synonymous with the inactive phase of the MJO. The yellows, oranges, reds, westerly anomalies, roughly equivalent to the active phase of the MJO. Now, this is past performance, the top part of the chart. Begin GFS operational forecast. So this is the forecast. GFS model goes out 2 weeks. Don't know how much I believe anything going out to 2 weeks, but we'll use it anyway. Anyway, so this is the whole planet though. The Pacific, the date line starts at 180, so right there. Okay, far west Pacific starts at 125 east, so right here. So just looking at well, you can see, actually, before we even get to the forecast, east anomalies steadily building, filling the Kelvin wave generation area for the past several weeks, if not a month, and then only just peaking right now, just raging easterly anomalies, almost filling the Kelvin wave generation area. But this is interesting here. Starting now, 5 days from now, westerly anomalies to build, filling almost half the Kelvin wave generation area, but then retracting pretty quick. So all in all, this looks like the inactive phase, and a pretty strong inactive phase taking over. That is something we need to watch to see how that helps feed the development of La Nina. So that forecast didn't look particularly good, but then we go to the outgoing long wave radiation. This is basically cloud cover. The active phase of the MJO, if it acts like a low pressure system and pushes warm moist air up into the atmosphere, eventually that warm moist air is going to hit cold air aloft and condense, forming clouds. And that's effectively what this chart shows. The blues, more cloud cover than normal. The oranges and reds, less cloud cover. The blues, the active phase of the MJO, which is our friend, which feeds the Jetstream and storm development. Oranges and yellows, the inactive phase. So let's get ourselves oriented. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea here, EQ is the equator. Dateline right there. The all-important Kelvin wave generation area right here in the far West Pacific. Clouds starting to build, suggesting maybe the active phase of the MJO is setting up, getting stronger 5 days from now over the West Pacific, exactly the way we want to see it. Continuing strong 10 days from now and 15 days from now. This per the statistic model. The dynamic model basically painting the same picture. In fact, let's see if we can frame up the last, we can't do it, but here's the statistic model, the strength 2 weeks out, the dynamic model 2 weeks out, both looking pretty good, suggesting active phase of the MJO is on the way. We'll take it right as fall is building. Here are the phase diagrams for those same two models. Statistic model here, dynamic model here. How do you read this? Well, first off, the MJO moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. So this chart shows you where the active phase is right now. That heavy dot, that's where it is. The further the dot is away from this circle, the stronger it is. Well, it's in the circle or on the circle. So the active phase in the West Maritime Continent, and pretty weak. The forecast track, 2 weeks now, three different tracks or bands, whatever you want to call it. Two of them show a very weak active phase in the West Pacific, where one of them shows a moderate active phase in the West Pacific. The dynamic model, not moving quite as aggressively, showing a modest active phase still over the eastern maritime continent 2 weeks from now. Then we have another upper level model, a statistic model. This goes out 40 days, South America, Central America, New Guinea there, 0 is the equator, dateline running right down here. Each panel 5 days long, so you go out in time. You can see the inactive phase currently over South America and the Atlantic, the active phase over the maritime continent right here, and lingering over the Indian Ocean, just starting to push into the West Pacific. Now, this runs about a week ahead of what actually happens at the surface because this is upper level, but you get the general idea. Active phase transiting across the Pacific into about the 18th of September and then over the East Pacific at that time, and then moving into the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, we're waiting for the hurricane season to start in earnest in the Atlantic. My guess is somewhere between about the 21st or even the end of September into October is going to be the main window, if there is going to be a window at all. Anyway, and back in the Pacific, inactive phase sets up towards the end of September and then locks all of the Pacific down during the month of October. The model goes to the 11th of October. Then we have the CFS model. This goes out a month. Past performance at the top. Down here is the forecast. It actually shows you the MJO and the relative strength of it in the solid black contour. Now back in, and the date line runs right up the middle. West Pacific starts about 125 east, so here. The area we're interested in the forecast is this area right in here, the West Pacific to about the date line, the Kelvin wave generation area. Dotted contour, this is your inactive phase of the MJO with blues, easterly anomalies, strong in control for about the next week. But then you see the active phase setting up here in the far West Pacific with a equatorial Rossby wave starting to interact with it, building a good pulse of westerly anomalies starting a week from now. And those westerly anomalies theoretically going the whole way across the Pacific as the active phase makes its trek across the Pacific from the first week in September, or I'm sorry, the 7th of September, the whole way through till just about the end of the month, when after that, then easterly anomalies return. So perhaps a strengthening MJO signal is forecast. And then the CFS model going out 3 months. Past performance down here, the forecast up here. Dateline runs right up the middle. This is the east-west component of the wind, the blues, easterly anomalies, the yellows, westerly anomalies. So this would be active phase of the MJO, inactive phase. Now there is good news in this forecast. In fact, in all these forecasts there has been. Easterly anomalies here on the dateline, pretty strong, but notice they're not building way off to the west like they had been forecast a couple weeks ago, a month ago, but pretty much, well, there's the date line right there, making it to the date line, but no further west, and then actually fading while moving off to the east, with westerly anomalies not even a week from now starting to set up, reaching almost to, I'll say 170 east. 3-4 weeks ago, they were lucky to make it halfway into the Pacific. This seems to be an upgrade, suggesting perhaps a weaker La Nina pattern. Let's overlay the MJO just to see what's going on. So here's our current inactive phase of the MJO with its blue easterly anomalies. We're past the peak of it already. And as we get into, well, about a week from now, inactive phase basically out of the Kelvin wave generation area, with the active phase building, producing westerly anomalies, making it to the date line, fading for just a little bit, but westerly anomalies persist, and then rebuilding again mid-October. Now again, not like completely filling the Pacific. This is no major active phase of the MJO by any stretch of the imagination, but during a La Nina year, any active phase and westerly anomalies making it to the date line. That's all good news. And then even after that, with a weak inactive phase, westerly anomalies continuing almost to the date line. This looks like an upgrade for sure. Now let's overlay the low pass filter. Maybe that will give us some hints of what's going on. All right, this black contour, the low pressure bias, the El Nino bias, or the El Nino indicator, if you will. You see the last little bit, it was over the Pacific back in May, the fading El Nino in the Pacific, but with the El Nino signal now building in the Indian Ocean. But is it really building? looking forward, it doesn't look any stronger looking forward than it's already been. And what's even more interesting, here's the high pressure bias. This is the clear La Nina signal. You see, it's died in early August, and now it's not even supposed to come back till October. And even when it comes back, it's a ghost, a pale remnant of what it was forecast even a week ago in last week's video. I mean, we'll see. I can't believe the model's actually showing this, but this is barely La Nina at all. This is very good news, and that explains why you have these westerly anomalies pushing deeper into the Pacific as we get into October and November. This strongly suggests, if it's believable, and I don't even knock on wood, knock on glass, whatever, strongly suggests our La Nina is going to be very anemic. Let's keep digging. All right, so let's go take a look down into the ocean. Subsurface temperatures, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Again, this is data from that TAO buoy array, the series of buoys strung across the Pacific. Whoop, what's this? See these X's here? These are sensors on the anchor lines, but there's a big old gap right here. Same gap that was there last week. Another littler gap here. There are sensors here in the far eastern edge of the picture. But they use a model to fill in the gaps, and sort of you get a profile of where is the warmer waters at. Are they in the West Pacific or the East Pacific? When you have a more warm water than normal in the East Pacific, that's a good sign of El Nino. When it's all confined over into the West Pacific, that suggests strong trades blowing, and that suggests La Nina. Right now, the 30-degree isotherm is at 172 east. Last week, it was over about 176 east, so suggesting trade stronger, pushing from east to west. The 29-degree isotherm is at 176 west. It was over at 173 a week ago. The 28-degree isotherm at 65 west, I think it was 62 west a week ago. All this indicating trade stronger than normal, and no big surprise. I mean, we saw in the previous charts, there's been strong easterly trades blowing for weeks now, stronger than normal. Again, indicative of La Nina. And then, of course, the 24-degree isotherm at 110 west. I think that's about where it was a week ago, so no major change there. Then we go look subsurface at the anomalies, not the actual temperatures like there, but are these temperatures higher or lower than normal for this time of the year? We see what really stands out, 2, maybe 3 degrees below normal temperatures here along the isotherm. This from about 150 meters down, pushing up this way. This is the path for warm or cooler water to push from west to east. Right now, cooler water in control, and remember there's a big old gap here, so I'm not sure that even this chart is believable. Let's go look at another chart. Now, this is the same style chart showing temperatures going down 50, 100, 150, 200 meters, but it not only uses the TAO buoy data, but also uses satellite data to get a sort of a bead on what's going on subsurface. And you can see here's that cool pool, but then over here where there were no sensors on the previous chart, you can see it just basically working its way, following the thermocline up towards Ecuador over here. Now this is interesting. There is this little break of warm water separating things out here. Maybe that is a sign of weakness in the cool flow. We'll have to see on that. But in general, cool water from about 145 to 150 west, all over the subsurface East Pacific. Warm water off to the west. Classic kind of weak La Nina pattern as of right now. Here is the satellite data used to build that last chart, sea level anomalies. So what's that mean? Is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? How can you determine that? Well, you take a satellite, beam a radar down, and then you count the time for the radar to return to Earth. If seas are higher than normal, you get a shorter return. If the ocean sphere is lower than normal, you get a longer return. And then from that, you can assume if you have cold water at depth, well, cold water contracts. That'll make a divot on the ocean surface, okay? And you'll get those longer returns. But if you have warm water at depth, it expands, displacing water up above it. You get the shorter return. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's look at this chart here. That is Chile, Peru. I know it looks really weird. Ecuador, Central America on up into Mexico. This is the equator. This is the dateline. Galapagos Islands right there. New Guinea out there. And right here, this is the area you really want to look at. This is classically where El Nino or La Nina manifests itself. -10, these are not temperatures, these are centimeters. 10 centimeters, like something like that. So the sphere of the ocean, if you took out the waves, the wind waves, the tides, the absolute normal sphere of the ocean is 10 centimeters lower than normal right now as compared to a regular year, suggesting cold water at depth from Ecuador over the Galapagos out here, going the whole way out to the dateline. So, you know, no big surprise. And then over time, you can see the movement of warm and cold water from east to west or from west to east. West Pacific here, East Pacific here, back a year ago, September 2023, when we had Kelvin waves driven by strong active phases of the MJO and El Nino pushing across the Pacific, building up the warm pool in the east, and then eventually the warm pool all got tapped out. Cold water erupted or upwelled in the West Pacific, and then again, that sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 Kelvin cold upwelling Kelvin waves, signaling the arrival of La Nina. Now, the interesting part about this is, and we'll just zoom in right here, you see you get these pulses and then you get a break like right there in June. And then we had another pulse in July, and here we are in August with another pulse. But notice more warm water pushing off to the east as compared to the previous pulse. Now, not as strong as El Nino, but at least a hint that there's weakness again in La Nina, or at least we're in a pulse. We'll see what happens. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next couple of weeks over here. And let's go look at the ocean surface, sea surface temperature anomalies, not subsurface, at the surface, okay? South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, the equator running right there, dateline at 180 west, so right there. Cold water along Chile and Peru, upwelling. Now here is much more colder water than there was a week ago, starting at the Galapagos, pushing on out to about, well, Hawaii's there, but till about 140 west. So definitely a increase in the cool pool here, likely driven by those strong easterly anomalies that are building over the Pacific as we speak. I would not be surprised to see this build even more as easterly anomalies move from the West Pacific into the East Pacific over the coming couple of weeks. This is the La Nina signal, definitely stronger than it was last week or at any time so far, but still not horrendously strong. Here's the sea surface temperature change for just the past 7 days. We see cold water building in this area and pockets of it with warmer water interspersed, but in general, I'd say the cold water takes the cake, at least for this week. So La Nina pulsing just a little bit. And then the backed off view, basically showing the same picture. Cold water making a bit of a arrival or making itself known here from Ecuador on out to about 140 west. And then this little finger of cooler water, this wasn't here on out to the dateline before, so suggestive of La Nina trying to develop to some degree. This is the sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 area. This is 5 degrees north and south on the equator, over there by the Galapagos and Ecuador. Temperatures actually holding pretty steady, minus 614 thousandths of a degree. La Nina, this isn't the official El Nino monitoring region, but starts at about a ½ degree below normal. And you see we've been hovering more or less in there for June, July, August into September now. So for 3 months, no big surprise. Now the Nino 3.4 index, this is the official El Nino monitoring region. Again, 5 degrees north and south of the equator from a point south of California out to about the dateline. You can see the trend going steadily downward. Today's value, 512 thousandths of a degree, ½ degree below normal. So this is the threshold at ½ degree right here for La Nina, and you got to be there for effectively 5 consecutive months before they declare it. We are all of 3 days into that, if that. So still not really La Nina. You notice in the previous images, there was a lot of warm water surrounding that cold water. So if this is La Nina, at least at this point, and this time of year, September, not a real strong one, at least at this moment in time. Here are the weekly sea surface temperature anomalies in the Nino 3.4 region right here. This is Nino 1.2, Nino 3, Nino 4. This is the 3.4 region. Right there, minus 0.0 degree anomaly. And you see, we've been just toggling right at 0 for the past month or 5 weeks. Even, I mean, look at this, going the whole way back to May, we've been right about dead neutral. So no major push one way or the other in the ocean, at least at this moment in time, though I think next week's reading will for sure be more negative because we saw those cold waters sort of surging as compared to the weeks and months prior. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? Okay, we've got subsurface temperature stuff going on, cold water in the east, warm water in the west. We have surface temperatures with that cool tongue starting to materialize. The atmosphere sits above that, and it is affected by the change in surface temperatures. But those surface temperatures have to hold for minimum of 3 months before the atmosphere really picks up on it. Cold water, because it's colder, doesn't support evaporation as much. That sort of builds high pressure, and that is the hallmark of La Nina. El Nino, conversely, if you have a lot of warm water in the west, so that supports more evaporation. That builds low pressure over the eastern half of the North Pacific and South Pacific, and that feeds storm development. Today's contribution, so this is the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin over the Indian Ocean. If pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index is negative. Well, it's positive, very positive, 21.34 today. And just looking back, it's been positive. I think it was 17 days running. Then prior to that, it was sort of toggling around neutral. So given the buildup of cold water and the inactive phase of the MJO and easterly anomalies over the dateline, none of this is particularly surprising. The 30-day average sort of takes the noise out of this. It's positive, 7.63. It's not till it gets to about 12 or 15 that you start going, maybe this is kind of serious. Looking back in time, well, we were -8. Now we're seeing at a minimum a good pulse of the inactive phase of the MJO driving the index positive. The 90-day average is your El Nino La Nina indicator. Right now, -0.95. So negative, where were we a month ago? -2 and 3. So still more or less hovering around neutral. Let's go look at a graph, see what this looks like. Here's the Southern Oscillation Index graphed out, going back in time to June of 2022. 0 is neutral, but the real range is from +7 to -7. And you can see here was our La Nina back in 2022, positive readings. The downward spikes are the active phase of the MJO, but you see the inactive phases were stronger on balance, keeping us up in the +20 range. Then here came our El Nino in 2023, driving things down. El Nino stalled, and these are multiple strong active phases of the MJO, but our El Nino stalled in June, July, finally kind of woke up in August, but never really regained its footing. As El Nino was supposed to be peaking here in the November-December timeframe, Southern Oscillation Index, which should have been down at -15 or something, was already on its way back up. But since then, it's just been toggling, bouncing around, still clearly in the neutral territory. That's a good thing. Not even close to La Nina yet. Now here's where more good news begins. We're looking at the sea surface temperature forecast in the Nino 3.4, the official region, the official El Nino monitoring region. And here was our El Nino with +2 degree anomalies, clearly in moderate plus El Nino territory, falling to neutral in July. Here we are in August, down at maybe a ¼ degree below neutral. And as we get into September, well, let's see, September would be right about here. Temperatures may be falling to ¾ degree below normal. And then here is the big upgrade. coldest temperatures per, this is the uncorrected model, minus 1.1 degrees. Last time we looked, they were minus 1.4, minus 1.45. So almost a 0.3 degree increase. That's pretty good. And then fading from there. And this is the most outlandish of the model run. The PDF corrected here is probably the better. It suggests temperatures only going down to 0.9 or 0.95 of a degree below normal. That's weak La Nina territory. And then as we get to January, that all fading and us returning to neutral. So the forecast, at least for the moment, looking better, even with easterly anomalies developing and pretty strong over the Kelvin wave generation area. So for right now, sort of zooming out, getting out of the weeds, just looking, a gale forecast the next 2 days over the northwestern Gulf of Alaska, generating 25, maybe 26-foot seas aimed at Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. So potential for small swell, nothing huge, but, you know, chest-high surf, something like that. We'll take it. Southern Hemi, though, quiet, nothing to forecast. Maybe something by New Zealand a week from now, but I don't give that much hope. We are in the transition period for sure, moving from summer into fall. If we get much of anything out of the Southern Hemi from here on, it's a gift. The real focus is turning to the Northern Hemi now. Beyond that, nothing forecast for the Northern Hemi, but lots of potential. The Jetstream trying to come online. We think there is still lingering energy from last year's El Nino in the atmosphere. That should drive the jet stream before La Nina gets too embedded in the atmosphere. That might help us also get decent precipitation into California as we get into December and January. Jury's still out on that a little bit. We'll have to see, but for right now, I'm guessing maybe 85% of normal precip for California for this coming winter. Surf-wise, on a 1 to 10 scale, you know, when you're in La Nina, it's typically 10 being the best and 1 being the worst. Given this, just guessing, probably about a 4 to maybe a 5. Maybe we'll eke out a normal winter, but seems like whatever is normal hasn't been normal for a very long time now, so we'll just have to play it by ear. When you get these sort of marginal patterns where it's not strong El Nino, not strong La Nina, things tend to, there's just not a lot of momentum in the atmosphere, so there's not a lot of energy to feed storm development. It's the swinging of the pendulum one way or the other seems to really supercharge the jet stream in addition to El Nino, La Nina. So we'll see how this all plays out. But for right now, little waves on the forecast. We'll take anything. It's been quite a while now since there's been anything decent. No real wind swell forecast either. So, you know, we'll have to hope for the best. Other than that, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Questions or comments or concerns always welcome. We'd be happy to answer. And if you'd like to make a donation to the cause, click the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.